Before this podcasty thing gets started, I want to give a quick shout out to @Blooming Jellies on Twitter. She's the person who made the thumbnail for this video. I'm using it with her permission, and you can check out her Twitter page below, as well as her Ko-fi. Thank you. My name is Dead Palette, and I love the ship PharMercy from Overwatch, and because of that, I'm going to be reading and reacting to, just giving my thoughts on Heaven is Betting on Us. This is posted to Archive of Our Own by the author Theoroark. They go by Tactical Grandma on Twitter. I'm just curious to see what this story has to offer. I've seen some interesting fan art from it, and as a result, I have been beckoned to read this. So let's see what it has to offer. Summary. The first time Fareeha sees her, she couldn't mistake it for a normal dream. Her glimpse of the woman is fleeting. Its kaleidoscopes almost instantly into something more mundane. But when Fareeha wakes up, she remembers it vividly. A woman with purple flowing hair, standing in utter darkness, her gray eyes meeting Fareeha's in shock. She thinks about her the rest of the day, and she sits through lengthy briefings on the mission status. And it seems as though this story was inspired by another piece of art, which I'm already familiar with, by Angela's Rockets, and it has in turn inspired more art. So let's actually get into the meat of the story. The first time Fareeha sees her, she couldn't mistake. Oh, so it's just the first paragraph again. That night, there is no mistaking it for a typical dream. The instant Fareeha falls asleep, she sees the woman again. The woman has her hand out, as though Fareeha's a skittish doe. That's, beautiful, imagery. The idea of, approaching, a very scared, small creature. You can see me, the woman says. Fareeha nods, and the woman's face crumbles in relief. You can see me, she repeats. Do you know how long it's been since someone could see me? I don't know what's going on, Fareeha says. I don't know either, the woman says, and she sounds absolutely thrilled about that. I'm Angela. Fareeha stares at Angela, this strange woman with lavender hair and violet armor, surrounded by absolute black and unnatural silence. Angela's smile falters at that, and without thinking, Fareeha offers, I'm Fareeha, as a reassurance. I'm so happy to meet you, Angela says. Then the darkness swallows her up, and Fareeha wakes up. She lies in bed motionless and tries to convince herself it was only a dream. So there's a large fantasy element to this, and I do like the idea of straying from Overwatch chronology to use the skins and items and all of these kinds of things in game to inspire another story, especially one of a more romantic nature. But this seems to have this undercurrent of because it's involving dreams and because it's involving a very fantastical figure, it's much more evocative of not horror, but there are these like weird, almost creepypasta elements of it where there's this unnatural silence, and the room that would naturally just have a natural darkness has an unnatural darkness to it. So it feels very ethereal. I will say that I'm not a fan of the idea of putting the word up in the sentence with up. The darkness swallows her up, and Fareeha wakes up. It kind of doesn't sound good on the air. But anyway, it becomes harder to do so that day at work. Convince herself it was a dream, that is. It becomes harder to do so that day at work. The astronauts from the previous mission meet with him again. Captain Winston shows them pictures from their lunar trek. When she flipped to a side of Dr. Zhou, standing in the distance, knelt down collecting soil samples, it hits Fareeha. The black all around Dr. Zhou's form, the stillness that's evident even in the static image. So I believe what is being conveyed here is that there's pictures of May on the moon, collecting soil samples, and in the distance you can make out the form of the alien Angela, the moon being, whatever it might be. I do wonder if Winston is still literally a gorilla, but we'll see. Or maybe we won't. Who knows? When she dreams that night and she sees Angela again, the first thing she does is look down. She has to look a ways down. The two of them seem to be floating. To be sure enough, down below the gray, craterous ground, and Fareeha can see its curvature. She can also see pinpricks of light just visible in the black. Okay, so she wasn't in her room. She was actually on the moon in this dream-like state. I'm dreaming about the moon because I'm wrapped up in the mission, Fareeha says slowly. She looks at Angela, and Angela's brow is furrowed. This is so vivid because I'm so stressed. You're like a sign that everything is going to be okay or something. Angela still looks confused, but she laughs. I'm glad you see me as a good omen, at least. Are you? She considers that for a moment, and then she says, My name is Angela. I may appear before travelers who need my help. Perhaps the idea is that because we're breaking out of just being on Earth and actually going to other planets, now we're being visited by these apparitions or whatever, and, Fareeha is becoming one of them. She then reaches out and touches Fareeha's arm. Just a light, grazing thing, but it's like nothing Fareeha's ever experienced. It's not a new feeling radiating from the point of contact. It's new feeling of feeling. Her arm feels light, like her bones have been hollowed out and filled with air. Fareeha can feel it fading as soon as Angela takes her hand away. And she's not sure if she misses it or not, but the sensation was so singular and potent that she is now utterly certain that this is not just a dream. This again is a very bizarre way of describing things. I'm not opposed to it, but the idea of it having this almost, it's obviously supernatural, but there's like this weird bend to it, because whenever you think of like bones being hollowed out and filled with air, it's usually not a good thing, but the way that they're describing it is just very dreamlike. I'm not sure what they mean by it's not a new feeling radiating from the point of contact. It's a new feeling of feeling. I don't know how to feel about that. That's a little clumsy. I think the idea of like her bones have been hollowed out and filled with air is a much more concrete way of explaining it, rather than getting wrapped up in, what was stated before. What kind of help are you offering? Fareeha asks. Her voice is hoarse. Help with averting the disaster, Angela says, or meeting the demands of fate. Averting disaster? Fareeha repeats. Averting disaster? Is she like Snake? Just repeating back what's been said? Even in the dream, she feels numb. The launch. Angela furrows at her, confused. Don't you know why you're here? No, Angela mutters. I'm sorry. Fareeha sits down. A disorienting experience when she is floating in outer space. Angela hesitates, then follows suit. Her purple ribbons and drapery flutter down with her. So it seems like we're kind of in two places at once, the way this is being described. We're both on the moon and in Fareeha's bedroom. And obviously we're also dealing with the possibility of a disaster in a launch towards the moon. I'm leading a lunar expedition, Fareeha says. She brushes her hair from her face and rubs her cheek. Billions have been poured into it, and if something goes wrong, my team will die for sure. But if there's an explosion or something during launch, all of those people on base, Angela clears her throat, I'm quite sure you know more about mechanics than I do. I'm fairly certain that's not it. But you know the moon, Fareeha says. Angela raises an eyebrow. You can walk me around it, show me where to land, show me what to look for. Angela is silent for a moment. Then she asks, What, is that how you think I should help you? Can you help me determine if any of the components of my rocket are improperly attached? No. Then I'm pretty sure that's how you're supposed to help me. Angela laughs softly and holds out her hand. Fareeha takes it without thinking, but she doesn't experience the same change and sensation she did the last time Angela touched her. The two of them simply begin to float down to the surface of the moon. Come, Angela says, as they touch the rough rock. I can't show you much tonight, but we can start. And then there's just a little dash. Did they have sex? Were they having sex there? The next night, Fareeha lands with her feet on the ground. Angela is waiting for her on the surface of the moon, right where they left off. You know, in a strange way, this is very evocative of the ending of Majora's Mask, where they're on the moon, and again, it's very dreamlike. I don't know how to feel about the story overall, and I do have to say, though, that the dreamlike quality of it has been very superbly caught. That is something that the story has really cultivated in very subtle ways. You know, Angela says, as they walk together through the crater, most humans had me doing more interesting things than just strolling about. Are you certain there aren't any sea monsters you'd like me to fight? Positive, Fareeha says. The crater walls are getting steep now, and she gets down on all fours to climb. Angela spreads her wings and flies lazily beside her as Fareeha watches, a little dumbstruck. So I'm not sure what they mean by sea monsters. Is Angela being facetious? I do think it's also a little bizarre that Angela's going by Angela in this story, considering she's kind of a moon fairy. I would think that perhaps she would go by Mercy or something like that, and then Pharah would be Fareeha, since, you know, this is supposed to be on Earth and more grounded, because you have to have that grounded element to help further the more dreamlike element. Otherwise, everything is dreams, and there's no basis in reality. We have to keep going back, and we have this like little bit of evidence with the picture of May on the moon, looking at the rocks, all of these things. What are you? Fareeha asks. The last person I helped called me a moon goddess. Okay, so apparently it's possible that May and Angela had already hooked up. That's not going to work, Fareeha says. I'm Muslim. That's shirk. She may not be particularly devout, but she knows she can't really bend on that. For a second, it occurs that Fareeha, that she should be concerned about offending a being powerful enough to pretend to godhood. But before she can react, Angela winces and nods, understanding. Moon spirit, then? So I think that that's a very interesting topic to broach, the idea that Fareeha is Muslim, and they kind of, in the actual Overwatch lore, it seems so far, try to do everything they can to avoid talking about this, but I will say that in my conceptualization of PharMercy and Fareeha as a character, she is very culturally Muslim, because which I guess would mean that she's not so concerned about something being labeled a goddess or whatnot, simply because she's lived a very cosmopolitan, non-sheltered lifestyle. You can see that Anna is more conservative and probably more devout, but she was, if not married to, at least having sex with a Canadian Native American First Nation person. So I doubt that she's too conservative either, making it more likely that Fareeha's less so. But Anna still does wear the headscarf. That's been very artfully built into the game. I wonder if the story is going to talk about the Muslim conceptualization of spirits. Fareeha remembers books of folklore tales about jinns. Yep, there we go. During, her grandmother gave her, saying that works. Okay, so that's her, she's a moon jinn. Okay. Which is the Muslim conceptualization of like spirits and entities and whatnot. Although, again, back on this subject, because I do find it incredibly interesting, I like the idea that Fareeha doesn't drink. And in a first date type scenario, Angela is, serving nice, probably French wine that she picked up from her time, being involved with Widowmaker, serving her like nice red French wine, and like Fareeha feels compelled to drink it even though she's never drunk a drop of alcohol in her life, and ends up getting really drunk, forcing it down, acting like it's fine. Anyway, that works. She continues her upward scramble. Vaguely, she thinks about how she shouldn't be dealing with Earth-like gravity here. With her Earth-like gravity here. But she's not really going to quibble with dream logic. Angela floats up beside her, and Fareeha thinks about her some more. Thinks about how they met. And then in the future, they adopt, and it becomes a TV show called How I Met Your Other Mother. You were surprised to see me, Fareeha says finally. Why? I'm not supposed to help humans, Angela says, but I haven't helped anyone in a while. They crest the lip of the crater, and she helps Fareeha up over the top. Not since you all stopped navigating by the moon, really. You don't have much use for me anymore. So maybe they've gone further than the moon? She says it with a smile, but Fareeha's looking in her eyes. She can't miss the sadness there. Even if she weren't, Fareeha thinks it would still twist in her gut. She may not know exactly what Angela is, but Angela does incredible things, and Fareeha still feels the ghost of her touch on her arm. For Angela to feel useless, to feel like she no longer belongs to Fareeha's world, and to exile herself to this smaller, lonelier one. I'm navigating to you, Fareeha says. And so I have plenty of use for you. You're helping me, right? Angela looks down at the pockmarked ground. Her smile seems real now. Yes, she says, I suppose I am. So again, there are these aspects of this story that you would normally see in a horror story. Something where you have people on the moon and they're seeing like evidence and bits and pieces, and there's these very dreamlike qualities, but instead of being something bad, something potentially dangerous, very 2001 Space Odyssey type of things, instead we're encountering an angel of sorts, a goddess. And I guess it's not an angel in this case. The Mercy iconography is really sticking with me, despite it being the moon goddess, skin for Angela. But, instead of being this horror stuff, it's a very romantic idea. The idea that this moon being is projecting itself into someone's dreams. That way they can navigate their way to them. Even devoid of the eros aspect of that romantic idea. The idea of one being, wanting to connect with another one, that bad that they would travel to the moon to meet them is very beautiful, and I really appreciate that. So there's another one of those little hyphen marks to denote that time has passed, and I'm just going to assume that they had sex again, and every time that there's a little dash like that, I'm going to assume that they lesed out super hard. Tell me more about your team, Angela says. Fareeha hums and thinks. She can't entirely recall what she told Angela already. They've talked about these a lot these past weeks, as they've spent the night walking to and fro across the moon, searching for any sign of danger. Angela's told her stories about the people she's helped in the past, all the far-flung corners of the earth she's explored with them, and Fareeha's told her about her efforts to break from the earth. Even if Angela can't help her with the mechanics of her ship, she seems fascinated by them, and always has questions. One thing I think a lot of authors who write short stories, even though I mostly deal with horror stories, one thing that I think people struggle to do in a brief amount of time is navigate their amount of show versus tell, because in a short story you do need a certain portion of tell to keep things moving and progressing. So this could be developed into a longer story, of course, but in the format of being a short story, we only really have time for this little paragraph to establish that they've been going at this for a while. They've been exploring the moon together for a while, and we have these little bits of just telling that are actually helping us out, moving the story along. The idea that Angela continues to be fascinated by the ship's mechanics, even though it's not something she knows about, is the perfect amount of telling, the perfect amount to, press us forward, to get to more dialogue, to get to more interactions, that I'm a fan of. There's Dr. Zhou, Fareeha says. She's going to be on ground control this time. You'd like her a lot, I think. She's the sweetest and smartest person you'll ever meet. I don't know about that, Angela says, with a little grin. Fareeha elbows her. Oh my god, yeah, they're totally, how about you just write the sex parts, cause that's totally, come on, elbowing her, come on. I'm serious, she is, and she'd be able to help answer all your questions about Earth a lot better than I could. She's a climatologist. She has a literal global perspective. That's a good way of conceptualizing May. For Fareeha to conceptualize May, the idea that she has a global perspective. I like that. Yes, maybe, Angela says, but I've learned a lot from you, and you seem plenty sweet too. Fareeha looks down, embarrassed, and when she does, she notices something. She's wearing her jumpsuit, the crinkly gray thing she wears under her spacesuit. Was I always wearing this? She asked, plucking at the material. Dream logic is still in play, but she vaguely recalls brushing her hair from her eyes before, and her jumpsuit hood keeps her hair firmly compressed. Not always, Angela says. You wore something bulkier for a while she mimes a helmet, and Fareeha nods. You started wearing this a few weeks ago, but the first night we really talked, anyway, you were wearing less. Less? Fareeha repeats. No, not that less, Angela says quickly, and she doesn't seem soothed when Angela smiles. It was shorts and a sleeveless top. Oh, Fareeha says, my pajamas. Sure, Angela says, and she laughs a little while Fareeha does. I'm sorry, I don't know how this works either. It's fine, Fareeha says. She holds out her hand and Angela takes it. For a second, Fareeha feels a shadow of the sensation she felt when Angela first touched her, but it's gone. Then it's gone. So, one thing that I always stress, and this is very much so personal taste, is a first-person narrative. I feel that this would be stronger if it was a first-person narrative for Fareeha, my personal opinion, simply because it puts the question in our head if Fareeha is a reliable narrator or not. But since it's a God perspective, then that gets away from me, personally, because I just take for granted what the author is telling us. But I do like that there is this conceptualization of, what she's wearing that is changing over time. I would say that, I'm making these jokes about the sexual content that is actually lacking from this story. It's a very fluffy story, right? I do see there being a connection there, and I'm wondering a little bit more about it. And I want it to be elaborated on. The idea that, Angela's making that joke about not that much less, is kind of setting the tone further back than I thought we were. Then again, this story is also conceptualizing Fareeha as being more conservative, more traditionally Muslim. And so, I think that Fareeha would tend to be more uptight about these kinds of things, be more prudish. The question is, how much more prudish would she be than your average lesbian? I just hate this thing so much, Fareeha says. I can't believe I have to wear it when I'm dreaming too. Angela laughs, nods, and they keep walking. The next night, when Fareeha wakes up in her dream, she looks down at her clothes immediately. She's in her pajamas again, a camisole, and boxers. Angela's eyes flick down quickly, then away. Fareeha smiles. Let's keep looking, Fareeha says, and they begin to walk. Fareeha likes Angela, so she doesn't want to tell her to look all she wants. They walk for a few more minutes, in relative silence. Then Angela stops suddenly. This is where the search this is where we started searching, she says. Fareeha looks down. She can't say she recognizes this particular arrangement of dirt and rocks, but she trusts Angela. Okay, Fareeha says. She tries to think things through logically, rationalize down to her rising panic. Do we take another path? Keep looking? The launch is tomorrow. I don't know if we have time. What are you looking for, Fareeha? A safe place to land the craft. Some noteworthy sample. This is as good a place to land as any, Angela says. She sits down, falling slowly, almost floating. And there isn't anything special here. Fareeha frowns and kneels down as well. But you said you were here to help me avert disaster, Fareeha says, and that you didn't know anything about my craft. Angela nods and looks down. She starts tracing like spiral patterns in the dirt. So if you can't help me with that, then what are you helping me with? I don't think I'm supposed to help you, Angela says quietly, her hands still in the center of the spiral she's drawn. Fareeha frowns. What do you mean? I mean I've been here alone for so long, Fareeha. I've watched humanity outgrow me from this distance, and I could entertain myself by watching. But the purposelessness, the loneliness. Angela looks up, and Fareeha is in shock to see that her gray eyes are shining. And then you came to me, Fareeha. You're so wonderful, so clever and so beautiful and brave, and tomorrow you're going to be here for real. Angela wipes her eyes with the back of her hand. Fareeha, in my wildest dreams, I couldn't have asked for a better person to know. You don't know how much you've helped me. Fareeha stares at her, this strange mystical being she spent a month walking with, talking with, learning from, flirting with. She feels like she would take her lifetime to understand what exactly Angela truly is, but now, Angela seems so human. All the more so when Angela moves towards her and puts her hand on her cheek. Angela stays like that and looks apprehensively into Fareeha's eyes. So Fareeha is the one who's closes the distance between them and kisses her. Angela's the one that deepens the kiss though, and they slide her arms around her waist. And she slides her arms around her waist. She's the one who pushes Fareeha so she's lying down, and who makes the disgruntled little noises when Fareeha falls with earthly gravity. while Angela floats slowly behind her. I can't wait for you to actually be up here, Angela says, when her mouth is just off of Fareeha's. Don't jinx my launch, Fareeha says. It's a feeble joke, but Angela sets a possessive hand on her chest, and her silver eyes turn steely. Your launch will go well, Angela says, and you will be well, because knowing you, seeing you, feeling you. Her other hand grazes inwards on Fareeha's hips, and Fareeha barely stifles a gasp. Doesn't even try to bite back her smile. That's how you're supposed to be with me. And then there's another hyphen, so they have dream space sex. Alright, that was very adorable. I enjoyed that. The story isn't over, I'm just saying, like, that climax of the story, you know, because now we're about to I think we're about to have the denouement, you know, the evening out action of the story, where the story comes to a nice, not abrupt conclusion, if that makes any sense. The launch goes well. Oxton tells her later that she's looking over and seeing how calm Fareeha was calmed her down. She tells Fareeha she's a great leader. Fareeha isn't sure if she can accept. She thinks she's a pretty good leader, sure, but she knows she was only able to stay calm because she knew what was supposed to happen. Oh man, that'd be really funny. She just gets up there with Tracer, and it's just like, yeah, nice to actually meet you, Angela. This is my girlfriend, Lena. Fareeha is the first one out of the shuttle, and she walks out alone. She's been in zero-G simulators. She's experienced weightlessness in the shuttle on her trip here, but nothing could ever really compare to the sensation of stepping into outer space for the first time. There's the weightlessness, yes, but there's also the difference in how your body moves against itself and how her cells go about their work. There's the sensation of moving through a kind of atmosphere that's completely foreign to her. Not completely foreign, she realizes with a jolt. She's felt this before. This is Angela's touch, and then Fareeha hears Angela's voice in the air all around her, saying jump. Fareeha jumps, and she sails into the air. She gets further and further from the ground, deeper into the lethally deep void. But she's not afraid, and sure enough, Angela appears, set a hand on her cheek, and arrest her ascent. You came, Angela said, her voice still in the air all around Fareeha. Her touch is magical again. You're here. Fareeha wraps her arms around her waist. Angela laughs, and God, the sound of that reverberating throughout Fareeha's world is worth everything, every mile she crossed to get here. The two of them descend now, gradually. Angela's hand glides through Fareeha's spacesuit, and they settle on the lower back, and settles on her lower back. She leans in, phasing through Fareeha's helmet, and kisses her. Fareeha can taste her now, smell her now. She's like the salt and coal and quiet summer night. She's the glow on Fareeha's tongue. She's stardust, Fareeha thinks. I'm so glad you're here, Angela whispers as their feet touch the surface of the moon. Of course, Fareeha says. This is where I'm supposed to be. So that is the end of the story. I really enjoyed that. It's not supposed to be a very literal story, I don't think. I think that there's a lot of stuff that's nebulous about the story on purpose. It's just fun and romantic, warm feelings. I enjoyed it. We have some notes here from the author. When Fareeha's talking about shirk, she's referring to idolatry. Thank you so much to @HoneySvani for the cultural help. I guess they helped out with, the information about Islam and those kinds of things. I'm Tactical Grandma on Twitter /Tumblr if you want to talk to me there. Please, I'll leave a link in the description to this person's Twitter account. Thank you so much for reading, and any comments/kudos would mean the world to me. Well, kudos, I think that I've offered a lot of comments, mostly positive. I really did have a good time reading this story. I normally do analysis of horror stories, but honestly, I have an easier attention span, a far longer attention span reading stories out loud than I do just reading them in my head. It makes it more digestible, and I wanted to read this because I like the art that I saw. So, thank you to Tactical Grandma for writing this story, and yeah, that's my 2 cents.